In this place, the first thing you lose is not money, and not time. The first thing that leaves you is air. The moment you step off the plane, you understand exactly what that means. A deep breath, something you have taken for granted your entire life, suddenly becomes a deliberate act. Your lungs expand, but there isn't enough oxygen to fill them. Your heart beats faster. Your head feels slightly light. And in that brief moment, one thought passes through your mind with startling clarity: if you were born here, you would have to learn how to breathe all over again. This is not a scene from a science fiction movie. This is real life, unfolding every single day on the Tibetan plateau, where the altitude alone is enough to stop even the fittest athletes in their tracks. Here, oxygen tanks are not emergency medical equipment. They are sold like bottled water. People buy them before they buy souvenirs. And very quickly, you realize a cold truth: in this land, oxygen is a commodity, a survival skill, and a fragile line between adaptation and collapse. But what makes Tibet truly extraordinary is not just the altitude or the cold. What sets this place apart is the way humans have learned to live with what seems impossible, not only through physical adaptation, but through belief, tradition, and an entire social system designed to survive extreme conditions. When you stand here, struggling with every breath, you are not only facing nature, you are facing a much larger question: how much must humans change in order to keep living? Tibet is often described through familiar images: ancient monasteries, prayer flags fluttering in the wind, endless snow-covered mountains stretching to the horizon. But that is only the surface. Behind this quiet beauty lies a far more complex reality, one where centuries-old traditions collide directly with the modern world. A place where surveillance technology exists alongside ancient faith, where rituals of life and death are practiced calmly, as a natural part of existence, and where rules of marriage, family, and community were shaped not by romance, but by survival. For many Americans, freedom is tied to personal choice: where you live, who you marry, what you believe, how you shape your own life. But here, on this land that nearly touches the sky, freedom once took a very different form. It was about preserving bloodlines, protecting land, and ensuring that the entire community could survive the next brutal winter. Individual choice did not disappear, but it always stepped aside for collective survival. And there is something most travel images never show you: life in Tibet does not end when the sun goes down. At night, when the wind grows stronger and the temperature drops, the silence becomes so heavy you can hear your own thoughts. This is when people here confront questions that others often avoid. Questions about death, about impermanence, about how the human body will eventually return to nature. The rituals that outsiders call strange, even frightening, are simply ways of fully accepting the laws of life. Tibet is not a place that makes you comfortable. It forces you to slow down, to listen to your body, and to look directly at human limits. Here, you cannot escape the truth that life is fragile. And yet, within that fragility, people have built a culture of astonishing resilience. On this journey, we will not look at Tibet through the eyes of tourists. We will step into its real life, from how people adapt to thin air, to how society functions under tight control, from ancient death rituals, to nomadic families still moving with grasslands and seasons, and to marriage traditions that once shocked the outside world, yet made perfect sense in the context of survival. Because to understand Tibet, you cannot simply ask how beautiful it is, you must ask a far harder question: what have humans had to sacrifice in order to keep living in a place where even breathing is a challenge? If you think Tibet is simply a distant destination with breathtaking scenery, this journey may force you to reconsider. Because to truly understand this land, we cannot rely on a geographic map alone. We need a different route, an invisible map drawn by thin air, by the rhythm of human life, and by beliefs that have kept people alive here for centuries. In the next part of this story, we will not rush through famous landmarks. We will move through deeper layers of life, where every step answers one very specific question: how can humans live, and continue to live, in a place where nature seems determined to push them away? Our journey begins with what is closest to us, yet also the most fragile, the human body itself. On this plateau, air is no longer a given. Oxygen becomes a deciding factor, shaping heart rate, sleep, and even the way a city is built. You will see why oxygen canisters appear everywhere, from hotels and convenience stores to roadside rest stops. But more importantly, you will understand why local people can walk calmly at altitudes where outsiders feel dizzy just standing still. This is not merely a story of biology. It is a story of adaptation, of how the human body and its environment have learned to survive together. From the body, we move to the second layer, where adaptation no longer happens inside lungs and blood vessels, but within the structure of society itself. Today's Tibet is no longer isolated from the world. Modern technology has woven itself into every street, every intersection, every moment of daily life. You will see dense surveillance systems existing alongside ancient monasteries, and you may begin to wonder what it feels like to live under the gaze of technology in a place once seen as a symbol of silence and contemplation. At this level, the question is no longer how people breathe, but how they are allowed to live within a tightly controlled social order. Yet a society is not built by technology and rules alone. It is sustained by ordinary, human encounters. Along the way, we will pause at small stories, moments that seem insignificant, yet reveal far more than they appear. A negotiation, a misunderstanding between a tourist and a local, a short ride through narrow streets. These details do more than soften the journey. They allow you to feel the real pulse of life, where people must constantly balance preserving identity with adapting to the steady flow of outsiders arriving each day. Once we have gone deep enough into modern life, we will turn in another direction, toward a place where time seems to slow. This is where the story reaches its deepest layer, culture and belief. In Tibet, the way people face death says a great deal about how they understand life. Rituals that outsiders often view with curiosity or fear are, in reality, part of a coherent worldview about impermanence, about humans as only a small element within nature's larger cycle. At this level, you are not just listening. You are invited to reflect on how modern societies elsewhere have quietly learned to avoid life's most fundamental questions. From these rituals, the journey moves beyond the city, past stone walls and paved roads, into the vast openness of the grasslands. Here, nomadic life opens an entirely different chapter. Families are not fixed to a single house. Communities are not defined by addresses. Life moves with grass, with seasons, and with the survival of livestock. You will see children growing up in wind and open sky, learning how to survive long before learning how to dream. This layer of the story is deeply human, where ideas of comfort, stability, and success are redefined from the ground up. And finally, we arrive at one of the most controversial and misunderstood aspects of Tibet, the way family relationships were once shaped to serve survival. Customs of marriage and lineage that shocked the outside world were, in fact, rooted in practical realities, land, climate, and the need to preserve limited resources. Here, love does not disappear, but it exists within a harsh ecosystem, where personal emotion must learn to coexist with collective responsibility. By the end of this journey, you may realize that Tibet is not a single story. It is an intersection of body, society, and belief. Each layer answers the same central question: how much must humans change to survive in a place where nature offers no mercy? And when you leave this land, what lingers may not be the dramatic images, but a clear realization that the line between living and merely surviving is far thinner than we often imagine. The moment the sun rises above the mountain ridge, the plateau begins to test you in its own quiet way, not with fierce winds or snowstorms, but with a dull, lingering sensation inside your body. You wake from what feels like a full night's sleep, yet your head is heavy, your mouth dry, your heart beating faster than normal. Here, your body refuses to let you forget that you are somewhere different. Every morning is a reminder that survival on the plateau is never guaranteed. At this altitude, the air is so thin that oxygen levels drop to roughly 2/3 of what they are at sea level. That means every cell in your body is working harder just to maintain its most basic functions. The brain, your body's largest consumer of oxygen, is the first to react. You may feel lightheaded when standing up too quickly, or experience a mild headache that lingers for hours. For first-time visitors to Tibet, this is not a rare experience. It is almost inevitable. That is why oxygen canisters are everywhere. They sit beside hotel beds, line the shelves of convenience stores, and hang from the shoulders of newcomers. What matters is not their presence, but how they are perceived. Oxygen here does not signal emergency. It does not evoke hospitals or accidents. It is simply an everyday item, like a warm jacket or a sturdy pair of shoes. For many travelers, the first breath taken from a small oxygen bottle brings relief, and an unsettling realization that their body now needs assistance just to keep going. Yet while outsiders rely on these temporary solutions, local people move calmly at the same altitude. They talk, work, and climb slopes without gasping for air. This difference is not the result of any miracle, but of adaptation across generations. Scientific research has shown that Tibetans possess biological traits that allow them to use oxygen more efficiently. But more important is how their bodies and lifestyles have evolved together with this environment. They do not fight the plateau. They have learned to live with it. This adaptation extends beyond genetics into the rhythm of daily life. In Tibet, everything moves more slowly. People do not rush from one place to another. Rest is seen as necessary, not as laziness. Even walking follows a different pace, steady, measured, and energy efficient. The body is trained to listen to itself, because ignoring even the smallest warning signs can lead to severe exhaustion. The plateau also affects things that seem unrelated to biology. Low air pressure causes packaged food to swell as if it might burst. When you open a bag of snacks, a soft hiss escapes, reminding you that the environment around you is unlike anywhere else. These small details may seem amusing at first, but they reflect a larger truth. Here, everything must adapt. Not just humans. Food and diet are shaped by altitude as well. The body needs more energy to stay warm and function under harsh conditions. Meals rich in fat and carbohydrates are not random preferences, but the result of centuries of trial and adjustment. Every meal is more than a matter of taste. It is a survival strategy. On the plateau, eating is part of biology, not just culture. What invites reflection is how Tibetans view their own bodies. They do not treat the body as a machine to be endlessly optimized, but as part of nature, governed by the forces of the land and sky. When they are tired, they rest. When the weather turns harsh, they slow down. In a modern world where people often push their bodies beyond all limits, this way of life can feel unfamiliar, even counterintuitive. But on the plateau, it is the only way to endure. For Americans raised in a culture that values speed, efficiency, and control, this experience can be disorienting. Here, you cannot force your body to obey your schedule. You must reshape your schedule around your body. The plateau becomes a strict teacher, reminding you that some limits cannot be overcome by willpower alone. And then, as you begin to accept this rhythm, something changes. Your breathing grows steadier. The headaches fade. You no longer feel as though you are battling the environment. You are adapting. That is the moment you grasp Tibet's first lesson. Before humans can change the world around them, they must learn to change themselves first. As your body gradually adjusts to the rhythm of breathing on the plateau, another layer of reality begins to come into focus. This is the urban life of Tibet, where modernity and tradition are not separated in the way outsiders often imagine. They do not stand at opposite ends. They overlap, interweave, and sometimes collide within the very same moment. Simply stepping onto a street in Lhasa is enough to sense that intersection almost instinctively. In the morning, the streets around Jokhang Temple fill with pilgrims. They move slowly, turning prayer wheels in their hands, murmuring familiar mantras. The faint scent of incense drifts through the cold air. Yet if you turn your head to the other side of the street, you see convenience stores, electronic billboards, and steady streams of traffic. There is no clear boundary between these two worlds. They exist side by side, calmly, as if they have long grown accustomed to one another's presence. What surprises many visitors most is not modernity itself, but the degree to which it is controlled. Security cameras appear at nearly every intersection, mounted high on light poles, quietly observing the flow of people below. For newcomers, this can feel uncomfortable, even tense. For locals, it has become part of the urban landscape, no different from roads or street signs. They live with it, adjusting their behavior to rules that are not always spoken aloud. The presence of surveillance technology raises a difficult question for those raised in societies that prioritize personal privacy. How does the feeling of freedom change when every movement can be recorded? In Tibet, the answer is not found in slogans or abstract debate, but in everyday adaptation. People continue to go to work, shop, talk, and pray. Life does not stop. It simply finds a new way to continue within conditions that have already been set. Yet Tibetan cities are not shaped only by large systems and structures. They are also built from small, deeply human interactions. A short rickshaw ride can become a lesson in cultural distance. A simple negotiation can reveal profound differences in values and expectations. For a local vendor, a price may represent an entire day's labor. For a tourist, it may be only a few minutes of spending. These encounters are not always comfortable, but they reflect a truth that globalization is rarely a smooth process. In local markets, tradition remains firmly rooted. Vendors spread their goods on worn-ups, offering everything from food and handicrafts to religious items. Transactions unfold slowly, sometimes stretching on simply for conversation. Relationships are built over time, not through speed. Even as digital payments and modern finance appear, face-to-face interaction still holds real importance. Here, buying and selling is not merely an exchange of goods, it is a social ritual. What is striking is that while technology reshapes the city's appearance, the community's core values are protected in very simple ways. Children are taught how to greet elders, how to behave in sacred spaces, and how to respect the unspoken rules of communal life. These lessons are not delivered through screens or apps. They are passed down through observation and daily practice, from one generation to the next. For Americans accustomed to cities where technology often leads and tradition struggles to keep up, this landscape can feel disorienting. In Tibet, modernity does not erase the past. It is forced to coexist with it. A monastery may stand beside a shopping center. A person may pray in the morning and work within a modern system in the afternoon. These contradictions are not resolved. They are accepted as part of life. It is within this acceptance that the logic of Tibetan urban life begins to reveal itself. It does not chase a single model. It does not try to become a global city in the familiar sense. Instead, it becomes a hybrid space, where people learn to live with overlapping layers of reality. Tradition provides meaning. Modernity provides tools, and between the two, life continues, slowly, quietly resilient, following a rhythm that only begins to make sense once you have stayed long enough to truly feel it. As we leave behind the streets where modernity and tradition stand shoulder to shoulder at every turn, the journey moves deeper into a different space, one where the rules of urban life gradually lose their authority. Here, belief is not merely a personal choice. It is the structure that supports how people understand life and death themselves. Tibet does not hide this reality. On the contrary, it places belief directly in front of you, forcing you to face it, whether you are ready or not. For many Americans, religion is often seen as a private matter, practiced within clearly defined spaces such as churches or scheduled rituals. In Tibet, however, belief flows into even the smallest actions of daily life. It appears in the way people walk around monasteries, in mantras murmured almost unconsciously, and in the way individuals pause and bow before sacred symbols they pass every day. Faith is not switched on or off. It is always present, like a quiet foundation beneath everything else. Because of this, rituals here are not performances. They are not designed to explain themselves or to satisfy the gaze of outsiders. They exist because the community needs them to maintain inner balance in the face of a harsh natural environment and an unpredictable life. In a land where nature can take a life through a single snowstorm or a sudden lack of oxygen, accepting impermanence is not an abstract philosophy. It is a survival skill. Within this context, The way Tibetans confront death often confuses the outside world. Not because it is violent, but because it is direct. Death is not pushed out of everyday life. It is understood as a natural continuation of existence. The rituals that accompany the dead reflect a deep belief that the body is temporary, and that life does not end at the boundary we are accustomed to calling final. For outsiders, the first reaction is often curiosity. The second is shock. And it is precisely here that the line between understanding and intrusion becomes dangerously thin. In Tibet, some rituals are not meant for curious eyes. They take place within sacred spaces, guided by unspoken rules upheld by the community for generations. When outsiders focus only on what appears strange, while ignoring the spiritual context beneath it, they unintentionally turn a deeply meaningful act into a controversial spectacle. What matters most is understanding that these rituals are not meant to provoke or challenge anyone. They emerge from a worldview in which humans are not placed at the center of the universe. The body is seen as part of a larger cycle, where the final act of giving is a return to nature in the most meaningful way possible. This perspective may feel unfamiliar to societies that hide death behind hospital walls and funeral homes. But here, it offers a remarkable sense of calm. This belief also shapes how Tibetans respond to pain and loss. Rather than resisting or denying grief, they seek to understand and accept it. Monks and the community play a guiding role, helping those who remain find meaning in the departure of loved ones. Ritual does not erase sorrow, but it creates a mental framework that prevents sorrow from becoming despair. In an environment where life constantly exists near the edge, this ability becomes essential. For American audiences accustomed to quick answers and clear solutions, this approach can feel unsettling. It offers no immediate comfort. It does not attempt to explain everything through modern logic. Instead, it invites you to sit with unanswered questions about their meaning of life, about how deeply we fear death, and about the many ways humans across the world have learned to live alongside that fear. It is at this crossroads, between curiosity and respect, that our journey must slow down. Tibet does not ask you to believe what they believe, but it asks something far more basic, and far more difficult: humility. When you step into a different worldview, listening becomes more important than judgment. And sometimes, the only way to truly understand a culture is not to ask more questions, but to accept that some things were not created to be explained, only to be felt, quietly, in silence. After moving through the deeper layers of belief and ritual, the journey needs a pause, one that brings us back to something basic, yet essential: food. In many parts of the world, cuisine is an experience, a pleasure, a form of art. On the Tibetan plateau, however, food is first and foremost an answer to the question of survival. It is not created to impress, but to keep people alive through cold, altitude, and an unforgiving environment. From the very first meal, it becomes clear that taste here follows a different logic from modern cuisine. There is little color, little seasoning, and almost no concern for presentation. Yet behind this simplicity lies a precise calculation of energy. At this altitude, the body burns calories faster to stay warm and to maintain basic functions. Every meal must provide enough fat, enough carbohydrates, and enough heat to replace what the body loses in thin air. One of the most representative foods is sampa, a flour made from roasted barley. To outsiders, sampa can seem dry, bland, even difficult to eat. To Tibetans, it is ideal food. It is light, easy to carry, requires no complex cooking, and delivers quick energy. Sampa can be eaten anywhere, from a nomad's tent on the grasslands to the path of a pilgrimage circling a monastery. It is not just nourishment, but reassurance that the body will not be left without fuel in harsh conditions. Alongside sampa is butter tea, a drink that often confuses visitors from the very first sip. Salty, heavy, and rich, it stands in sharp contrast to the light, delicate tea many Americans are used to. But when temperatures drop and plateau winds cut through the air, its purpose becomes clear. The butter helps retain body heat, while the salt replaces lost minerals. Butter tea is not meant to be savored slowly. It is meant to keep you moving, working, and alive. This diet reflects a deeply practical relationship between people and their environment. Tibetans do not eat according to preference, but according to what the body requires under specific conditions. When winter arrives, meals grow heavier. When food is scarce, simplicity becomes absolute. There is no room for waste. Every ingredient has a defined role in maintaining strength and endurance. What is striking is that in a society where food is closely tied to survival, meals are also profoundly communal. People eat together, share from the same pot, drink from the same kettle of tea. This is not only a way to conserve resources, but a way to reinforce bonds. In a harsh environment, unity is not an abstract value, it is a matter of life and death. A shared meal is how a community ensures that no one is left behind. For Americans accustomed to endless supermarket aisles and personal choice, this experience can be jarring. Here, you do not ask what you want to eat today. You ask what you need to eat today. This seemingly small difference reveals a fundamentally different way of living. When nature limits choice, people learn to value what they have instead of constantly seeking something new. Tibetan food culture also reveals how deeply adaptation shapes tradition. These dishes were not designed in nutrition laboratories, yet over centuries they have proven their effectiveness. The human body, the environment, and eating habits form a closed loop. Change one element, and the entire system must adjust. As you sit in a small room, holding a bowl of hot butter tea, with cold wind outside and the pale plateau sky overhead, you begin to understand that food here does not need to win over your palate. It needs to do only one thing, and it does it well: keep people alive. In a world where many cultures have separated eating from survival, this lesson feels unexpectedly powerful, leaving behind warm kitchens and crowded streets. The journey opens into an entirely different space, one where life is not measured by fixed addresses or tightly packed schedules. Here, life is measured by wind direction, the color of grass, and the movement of herds. This is the world of nomadic communities, the clearest human chapter in the story of Tibet, where the essence of existence is laid bare, simple and unfiltered, on the vast grasslands. The idea of home carries a different meaning. Tents are not built to last forever. They are raised with the understanding that one day they will be taken down, moved, and rebuilt elsewhere. Nomadic life does not seek stability in the way many modern societies do. Instead, it seeks flexibility. When the grass is exhausted, they move on. When the weather changes, they adapt. There is no romanticism in these decisions. It is simply the only way herds and humans can survive together. Livestock sit at the center of nomadic life. They are not merely property or income, but a direct source of survival. Milk, meat, wool, and even dung are used. Every animal carries a clear value, tied to the survival of the entire family. Children grow up in this environment learning to care for the herd from an early age. They recognize sounds, tracks, and behaviors of different animals. This knowledge is not written in books. It is passed down through observation and practice. Day after day, to outsiders, especially American audiences accustomed to urban comfort and security, this life may appear fragile. But to nomads, that fragility is intentional. They understand the limits of the land and of themselves. Rather than building rigid structures to resist nature, they choose to move with it. Their resilience lies not in staying put, but in knowing when to leave. Nomadic families often function as complete working units. Everyone, from small children to elders, has a defined role. Work is not divided by modern job titles, but by the real needs of daily life. Elders watch over the camp and pass down experience. Younger adults tend the herds and travel farther. Children learn while living inside the rhythm of survival. In this environment, the idea of individual independence is understood differently. It does not mean separating from the community, but becoming a reliable part of it. One of the most striking aspects of nomadic life is the relationship between people and land. There is no ownership in the fixed sense. Land is treated as temporary space, used, then returned to nature. This perspective creates a very different attitude toward resources. There is no incentive for excessive accumulation, because there is nowhere to accumulate. Everything must be enough to live. and nothing more. This way of life is also inseparable from spiritual belief. Small rituals are performed before moving camp, before raising a tent, or before grazing in a new area. These acts are not theatrical. They are ways of asking permission, of showing respect to the land they are about to use. In a world where nature can turn harsh without a warning, this respect is not superstition, it is a strategy for spiritual survival. For American audiences accustomed to measuring success through long-term stability and constant growth, nomadic life poses a difficult question. Is stability truly the same as safety? Or is the ability to move and adapt sometimes the strongest foundation of all? In Tibet, this answer has been tested across generations. As the sun sinks over the grasslands and the wind turns colder, nomadic families gather around a small fire. There are no city lights, no traffic noise, only people, livestock, and the open sky. In that moment, the human spine of this story becomes clear. Not grand structures or complex systems, but the ability of humans to organize their lives around what is most essential. And from its simplicity, they create a form of existence that is both fragile and astonishingly resilient. As this journey slowly comes to an end, what remains is not a single image, nor a shocking detail meant to linger in your mind. What remains is a question that has followed us from the very beginning, one that now carries a clearer answer. How much must humans change to survive in a place where even breathing can no longer be taken for granted? And Tibet, through everything we have just witnessed, answers that question with striking honesty. The answer does not lie in any single factor. It is not only the body adapting to thin air, nor merely society adjusting to function under harsh conditions. It is a convergence of many layers of change happening at once. The body learns to use oxygen more efficiently. Daily life slows down to avoid exceeding biological limits. Communities learn to place collective survival above individual desire. And belief learns how to support people when everything else becomes fragile. From the outside, Tibet is often labeled as harsh, inhospitable, even incompatible with the modern world. But from within, it is a system refined over centuries to address the same challenge every society faces, only under far gentler circumstances. How do humans continue living when the environment offers no advantage? How do they create meaning when life constantly exists at the edge? For American audiences raised in a culture that values conquering nature and expanding limits, this story can feel unsettling. Here, people do not seek to defeat nature. They seek to live alongside it. They accept that some limits cannot be overcome by technology or sheer willpower alone. And within that acceptance, they build a culture of remarkable endurance. Perhaps Tibet's greatest lesson does not lie in what feels exotic, but in what feels deeply familiar. That life is not always about moving forward faster. Sometimes, it is about knowing when to slow down. That freedom is not defined solely by the number of personal choices we have, but by the ability of a community to survive together through the hardest conditions. And that belief, whatever form it takes, still matters when humans face questions that comfort and science cannot fully answer. When you leave this plateau, you may not carry a ready-made formula to apply to your own life, but you may carry something quieter, more subtle, a shift in perspective, a deeper awareness of the body's limits, a renewed appreciation for things we often take for granted, breath, food, and human connection. And perhaps, a new question will take root, quietly but persistently. If we were forced to live under harsher conditions, how would we change in order to survive? Before we close, I would like to hear from you. What part of Tibet's story stayed with you the most? The way people adapt to altitude? The coexistence of modern life and ancient tradition? The rituals that reveal how life and death are understood? Or the nomadic way of life, where flexibility becomes the foundation of stability? Share your thoughts, because every perspective helps complete this picture. If you would like us to explore one of these pillars more deeply, let me know. It could be a focused episode on urban life and surveillance, a deeper journey into spiritual rituals, or the human stories behind nomadic families. And if this journey offered you a new way of seeing the world, follow along so you don't miss the next stories from places where humans must change in order to live. Because when we learn how others survive in extreme conditions, we are not only learning about them, we are learning about ourselves.